Welcome back, Respawn Realm Gang, to another video. Today, we will discuss the relevance of Dark type decks in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Now, with so many different types emerging as clear favorites in competitive plays, will Dark decks really fall off, or will it make a comeback? That is the topic of discussion for today's video, guys, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, a question that really haunts a lot of Pokemon TCG players in the community is what really is the best Dark type deck in the game? The Darkness type, guys, has been a fascinating archetype in Pokemon TCG Pocket, with its presence in the metagame fluctuating wildly, rising to the top briefly before falling back down again, unfortunately. Despite its inconsistency, many Pokemon Pocket players remain optimistic. That includes myself as well, guys. We're convinced that Darkness type decks hold untapped potential. To support these fans in crafting a genuinely competitive Darkness deck, I have compiled what I believe to be the only meta-relevant Darkness deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Here's everything you need to know about it, guys. So in the current Pokemon TCG Pocket meta, in my opinion, guys, the only viable Darkness deck is the Scolipede and Weezing setup. Now, before talking in depth about how this deck plays out, let's have a close look at what are the cards we're using to build this deck. As we all know, guys, Scolipede is a 3-stage evolution, with its first stage being Venipede and its second stage being Whirlipede. So we're obviously going with 2 Venipedes, 2 Whirlipedes, and 2 Scolipedes, followed up by Koffing and Weezing. Weezing, as we all know, guys, is a 2-stage evolution again, so we need to keep 2 cards from each evolution to maximize our chances of evolving into 2 Weezings right away, which is a very important part of this deck play, which is poison based, and I'll throw more light on it later on. Talking about the supporter and items, Koga, a fan favorite, especially if you're playing the Weezing card or the Muck card. We're going with 2 Kogas. Koga, as we all know, guys, it allows you to retreat your Weezing back into your hand, especially if you've taken any damage into them. We're going with 2 Leaf cards, which supports retreat. We're going with 1 Sabrina card. Sabrina, as we all know, guys, it allows your opponent, it allows you, beg your pardon, to force your opponent to change his active Pokemon. We're going with everybody's favorite Professor's Research to draw 2 cards. We're going with 1 X-Speed. We're going with 1 X-Speed because we already went with 2 Leaves, guys. And like I mentioned before, guys, like this deck depends heavily on retreating and bringing out Scolipede into the active spot. So obviously that is one of the key reasons why we're going with 2 Leaves and 1 X-Speed. We're also going with 2 Pokeballs, which we all know helps us draw 1 more card from our hand. Now, let's talk about the most important thing is what is this Darkness type deck's synergies, which is the most important topic of conversation today, because guys, like, it's very important for us to know like how this deck plays, because like I said, there are other types which are making its waves in the meta, so playing this deck to its utmost potential is very important. Venipede and Whirlipede, guys, evolves into Scolipede, as we all know. Whirlipede, however, guys, a lot of us think like Weezing, we're keeping Weezing in this deck for its poison ability, but Whirlipede, guys, also poisons the opponent, setting up Scolipede's ultimate attack. As we all know, guys, Scolipede's final attack does 70 damage, but if the opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned, then Scolipede adds an additional 50, which is a whopping 120 damage to the opponent's active Pokemon, which is pretty much crazy. And if you have a type advantage, that's 140 right there. Koffing and Weezing, guys, are the backup poison lineup. Like I mentioned, in this deck, it's all about poisoning a Pokemon and hitting it with Scolipede's 120. So naturally, a lot of Pokemon who has the ability to poison is gonna be in this deck, and that is the main play style of this deck, guys. Weezing's ability, guys, is basically a substitute for Whirlipede's poison attack. So if you don't have the Whirlipede at that current circumstance to poison the opponent's active Pokemon, that is where Weezing comes into play, and Weezing will do it for you if the Whirlipede cannot do it. Because like I mentioned, guys, without poisoning, Scolipede is not going to be that effective. Koga and Leaf, guys, will be assisting in your retreats, like I mentioned before. A Koga is a very important card, especially if you're playing Weezing or Mach in your Dark-type decks. Weezing in this case, what Koga basically does, guys, as we all know, is like, let's suppose like you have taken some damage on your Weezing, and there's a high chance that the opponent might knock the card out. So what Koga does is it just breaks your Weezing into two separate cards, which is the Koffing and the Weezing, and sends it back to your hand, not on your deck, guys, but back in your hand, so that you can rebuild it again. And especially with just one energy, it should not be much of a problem. And Scolipede is already there, guys, to do the damage, so it should be a very nice strategy in terms of gameplay. So what this Koga and Leaf card basically do, as I mentioned, is it assists you with retreats. They allow you to swap Scolipede in and out to maximize the damage output, guys. Now, one pro tip, guys, that I want to share with you guys before talking in further details about this deck is that please use the old Koffing. Yes, the first evolution into forming Weezing is Koffing, but Koffing is available in the Genetic Apex expansion as well as the Mythical Island expansion. But the pro tip that I want to give you guys is please use the old Koffing from the Genetic Apex expansion as compared to the new version, because the new version has a higher retreat cost, which does not align with the deck strategy. So please keep that in mind, guys, that the new Koffing that got released has a higher retreat cost and it does not align with the strategy that we are coming out with. So it's very important that you only use the Koffing from the Genetic Apex expansion. Now, another important topic that I want to discuss with you guys while addressing this Dark-type deck is why Scolipede's deck is the ideal Darkness lineup. A lot of you must be wondering like, oh, there are so many good cards that got released, so why are we only considering Scolipede's deck is the ideal Darkness lineup? Well, guys, unlike Arbok and Weezing decks, and before talking about that, guys, I just want to mention that Arbok and Ekans, which is basically a two-stage evolution, like Ekans evolves into Arbok. One of the key points about playing with Arbok is it stops your opponent's active Pokemon from retreating, so that was an attribute that made it a fan favorite. But unlike Arbok and Weezing decks, the Scolipede and Weezing team, in my opinion, guys, offers greater consistency, which is basically what we are looking for in a deck. Scolipede, as we all know, the new star of the Darkness archetype, stands out for two key reasons. Now, a lot of guys it's debatable, guys, and a lot of guys till date prefers using the Arbok Weezing, but I will explain you why the Scolipede and the Weezing team is far greater than the Arbok and the Weezing. And two of the reasons are, one of them is its evolution aligns perfectly with the curve. And number two is it remains unaffected by Sabrina, which is so important, guys, because a lot of times we have noticed that after getting a Sabrina hit, our whole strategy is completely changed. But especially for this deck, guys, like the Sabrina basically does nothing to you and it works for your favor. And why is that? I will let you know later on. Now, firstly, I did mention point one of why I think this Scolipede and Weezing team offers greater consistency is that Scolipede has a curve-friendly evolution, which I feel is the number one reason why I prefer using the Scolipede and Weezing team. Because Scolipede, as we all know, is a stage 2 Pokemon. It can attack early with its primary move, which requires only 2 energy. Guys, remember this. Forget about the poisoning, forget about what it does. With just 2 energy, you are pretty much set to do 70 damage and 90 with the type advantage. So it's already a great card, and it has the potential to wipe out a lot of first stage, second stage evolution Pokemons from your opponent's side. So I feel like Scolipede already has what it takes to be an integral part of a great meta playing deck. So coming back to the topic, guys, as I mentioned, it only takes 2 energy to fire off its primary move. Additionally, guys, its pre-evolutions, which we discussed about, which is Venipede and Whirlipede, can both attack using just 1 energy. And not to forget, guys, Whirlipede also has the poison effect on your opponent's Pokemon, just like Weezing, which also makes it easier for Scolipede to just come in and do the 120. And this is why I feel that they make an excellent team for playing on curve. So that is probably one of the reasons why I prefer using the Scolipede and Weezing team as compared to the Arbok and Weezing. Now, the second point that I mentioned was it's unaffected by Sabrina. By that I mean, guys, Sabrina card, as we all know, is a very important supporter card in almost any kind of gameplay, but in this one especially, your opponent's Sabrina cannot hurt your Scolipede. And why I say that is because Scolipede relies on frequent retreats to unleash its ultimate 120 damage attack. Like I mentioned, guys, with the poison, 70 plus 50, which is 120 damage, is what you get from your Scolipede. To do so, you need to frequently bench it, poison the enemy's Pokemon with another Pokemon, which is preferably the Whirlipede or the Weezing, and then bring your Scolipede back into play. And as we all know, guys, the only Pokemons we're using in this deck is Weezing and Scolipede. So regardless of whether you get a Sabrina or not, you're going to be able to bring the other Pokemons, which is going to be either a Weezing or a Whirlipede, and you can poison, which plays to your advantage. And then you can obviously bring back your Scolipede and do the 120 desired damage and take the game. So this is why I honestly feel that Scolipede and Weezing deck has that slight advantage as compared to the Weezing and Arbok deck. Consequently, when an opponent, like I mentioned, guys, using a Sabrina on Scolipede, it will most often work in your favor by aligning it perfectly with the strategy that we are coming with. So guys, I feel like we are nullifying a supporter card right away with the playstyle we're coming with. So that is amazing in my point of view. Now, the biggest question for this video is Darkness type decks making the waves in the meta, and what is basically their performance in the meta? Well, guys, I analyzed 10 recent Pokemon Pocket tournaments, in each one with over 100 players and at least 1 player using a Darkness type decks. Well, guys, the results don't favor the archetype, and unfortunately, Darkness decks averaged a position of 61.3, failing to even crack the top 50. Yes, guys, it's very unfortunate based off on my analysis, and in every competitive play, Darkness type decks are falling short. Now, I don't know, with the onset of the future Apex sets and the future releases of different dark type decks, this scenario might change, but as of for now, Darkness type decks isn't cutting it as compared to the other types, which are absolutely running the meta right now. The Darkness archetype meta standing has always been inconsistent, guys, like I mentioned at the start of the video. Before Mythical Islands release, Arbok Weezing lineups briefly peaked in the metagame before quickly fading away. Scolipede's fleeting fame marks the second time the Darkness type deck has attempted, but unfortunately it failed again to make a significant impact, guys. So like I said before, we have to keep our fingers crossed and just hope, because as we all know, guys, like Darkness type decks is a lot of players' favorite typing in terms of gameplay, and we just hope that in the future Pokemon TCG Pocket just releases card that makes this deck equally powerful as some other types currently in the game. Now, the last topic of discussion, guys, that we're gonna discuss about is how one card absolutely ruined darkness type decks. Now, we discussed about how darkness type decks are not quite cutting in the meta, and we haven't yet discussed about why is it that darkness type decks are not cutting in the meta. For me, one of the biggest reasons, like there are multiple reasons, guys, but in my opinion, one card has absolutely ruined the darkness type decks. As we all know, guys, darkness cards are weak to fighting type Pokemon, which wasn't a significant issue during the Genetic Apex era. However, the launch of the Mythical Island mini set shifted the balance by introducing a darkness countering card, the new Golem. Without Golem's release, Scolipede and other darkness cards had a potential to shine in the meta, but that's no longer the case, unfortunately, guys. Currently, Golem lineups dominate PvP matches and tournaments, making it nearly impossible for darkness archetypes to thrive. The unfortunate reality is that this situation is unlikely to change until the next expansion, which is the Dialga Palkia, which is to be released. And even then, the darkness type Pokemon may struggle to regain popularity as Golem is expected to remain a key player. With that, I conclude the video, guys. Let's hope dark type decks make a heavy comeback, as it is one of my favorite types in Pokemon TCG Pocket. Guys, please don't forget to like and share and subscribe to my channel, as it motivates me to make more content for you guys. See you all in the next video. Until then, happy collecting.